Are you confident? Are you a confident person? How about courageous? What's the relationship between confidence and courage? That's what I want to take just a few minutes to talk about here today. If you've seen me, if you've seen one of these streams pop up this week, you know that I've been talking about topics that sort of revolve around a theme of courage first, with the eye of getting to today, Thursday, and talking about courage over confidence. I'm going to take just a few minutes to for this conversation today because things are evolving today, even as we speak. So join the conversation, if you will. My name is Jeff Eccles. I'm the president and the chief strategy officer of Echo Engagement. I'm also the director of brand strategy for EntreArchitect. And as part of EntreArchitect, one of the things that I do is I host a thing called Context and Clarity. Context and Clarity is a live stream that happens every weekday at 4 p.m. Eastern. On Thursday afternoons at 4 p.m. Eastern, we call it our simulcast version, Context and Clarity Live, that goes to Facebook and LinkedIn, to Twitter, and or to Twitch and to YouTube. And we have a special guest, Catherine McPhail, my co-host, and I have a special guest for Context and Clarity Live every Thursday afternoon. That's what's evolving today, and I'll get into that in just a minute. So Context and Clarity is that live stream. It's also a podcast that comes out every morning at 12:01 actually a.m. Eastern, and it is a Clubhouse. It's a coffee conversation inside of the Clubhouse app, if you're familiar with it. If you need to know more about Clubhouse or want an invite or whatever, just put it in the comments section from wherever you are right now, whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitch right now. Just let me know if you need to know more about Clubhouse. But Context and Clarity is like I said, it's a lot of things. It's the live stream, it's the podcast, it's the conversation on Clubhouse. And we take a theme every week that's based on our special guest for that week, and we take a different spin on that topic every single day. So this week we've been talking about courage. Starting on Monday, talking about fear. What's a fear that's holding you back? What's the cost of that fear? On Tuesday, we talked about imposter syndrome. Yesterday, we talked about perfectionism. And then today, we've talked about, at least on Clubhouse this morning, we talked about courage and confidence and the relationship between the two. So I thought we'd touch on that here for just a few minutes today in this 2 p.m. Eastern live stream. So one of the things that I need to say at the very beginning of this conversation is that, number one, I'm not an expert. A few weeks ago, we talked about emotional intelligence. I'm not an expert on emotional intelligence. We talked about the following week, we talked about being human, about connecting and communicating and collaborating as humans. I'm not an expert on that either. I'm not an expert on courage or confidence. I'm simply here to facilitate the conversation, and I invite you to the conversation. If you are an expert on the topic of the day, on the theme for the week, I invite you to weigh in, share your knowledge, share your expertise, share, yourself as that expert. If you have questions or advice or stories about the topic of the day, share those, share them in the comments. So if you're out there watching this live right now, first of all, say hi. Let me know that you're here. Let me know where you are, and let me know what you do. As you might guess from the title or the name EntreArchitect, much of the audience for Context and Clarity in its different forms, much of the audience for that are architects. However, I know that since I'm streaming this now to YouTube and Twitch and to LinkedIn especially, that my network, as you would say on LinkedIn, many of my connections on LinkedIn spread across professional services. So you may be an architect, but you may be an engineer or a contractor. You may be a creative or design professional, a doctor, an attorney, a real estate professional. Most of my network on LinkedIn and beyond are in the professional services world. And that was an epiphany that I had several weeks ago when we started talking about emotional intelligence on Context and Clarity. I realized that what we were talking about when we talked about empathy, we talked about the different facets of emotional intelligence, those weren't conversations for architects. They were conversations for all of us, topics that all of us need to be better human beings, to be better business people, to be better professionals, to do better work. And so that's why I decided to launch this 2 p.m. live stream to see if it would take hold, to see if it would gain any traction in having these conversations outside of the Context and Clarity brand. I know it takes a lot to build these types of efforts up. I've been hosting Context and Clarity. We launched Context and Clarity April 6th of 2020. So we're almost to the 1 year mark for Context and Clarity. And so it takes a lot. It takes a lot to get people into the conversation and to get it to take traction. But that's what I've been trying to do for the past several weeks in these conversations. Well, let me give you a little bit. First of all, let me give you a little bit of background, a little bit of information. I said that things are evolving. Our special guests that we host every week are varied from week to week. Sometimes they are identifiable figures from architecture. We've had Evan Troxel, we've had Enoch Sears, we've had Ryan Willard, and others from the architecture world as our guests. So if you're an architect, you know who those people are probably. We've had guests from outside of the world of architecture. We've had Mike Michalowicz, we've had Seth Godin, we had Brian Kramer last week, all well-known authors in their own rights and thinkers in their own rights. Today, the special guest was supposed to be Debbie Millman, the creator and host of the longest-running design-focused podcast on the planet called Design Matters. Also an author, an educator, a designer. Unfortunately, Debbie's not feeling well today, so we're not going to have Debbie this week. We'll get her rescheduled for another week, somewhere down the road when she's back on her feet and feeling better. Right now, the plan this afternoon, instead of having Debbie, is to have Roxane Gay, a prolific author, a well-known author, well-recognized author. And so we're going to have Roxane Gay on Context and Clarity here in just under 2 hours at this point. So a little bit of a pivot. We'll have Roxane on and we'll see where the conversation goes. It's the great thing about Context and Clarity. It is about a conversation. We'll probably start out talking about courage, and we'll see where the conversation goes from there. One of the big keys, one of the things that we do with Context and Clarity is we try to engage our live audience as much as possible. I mean, look at what is available to us. I'm streaming to you right now, whether you're seeing this on LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitch. I'm streaming this to you, and you have the ability right now to watch this and to listen to this and comment on this. You have the ability to become part of this conversation. In Context and Clarity, in its daily form, it only streams to the EntreArchitect Community Facebook group. There's about 7,000 members or so in that group. It's a pretty active group. Over the course of an hour conversation in Context and Clarity on a daily basis, just inside that one private architect-only Facebook group, we may have as many as almost 300 comments in an hour. So that's the level of engagement. That's the speed at which things move in that version of Context and Clarity. So, we could have a show where we bring on Debbie Millman, or we bring on Roxane Gay or Seth Godin, or any of the people that we have or will talk to. And it could simply be an interview. It could simply be Catherine and I talking to whoever the guest is that week. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Debbie Millman's Design Matters podcast, she's been doing that for 17 years. Design Matters has been going on from a dial-up modem to where it is today. 17 years. She's been interviewing some unbelievable design creatives and prolific producers, artists, musicians, architects, beyond. And she does a great job. Very, very professional, very deep thinker, and she digs deep into the humanity of each of those guests, and those are fantastic shows. But what we have wanted to do with Context and Clarity, leveraging the strength of the platforms that we're able to use, is we've wanted to bring in the guest, talk to the guest, and bring our audience in as much as possible. So part of the format is for us to start the conversation and then bring in as many questions and comments from the audience as we can into that conversation. So we literally spread that conversation across the globe. So that's what we do with Context and Clarity. We try to find clarity around one topic every day, and have our special guest on Thursdays to dig into that. So we'll do that today with Roxane Gay. I invite you to that conversation. If you're seeing this right now on LinkedIn, just come right back here on LinkedIn. If you prefer YouTube, go over to the EntreArchitect YouTube channel and view it there, comment there. If you're on Twitch, same thing, EntreArchitect Twitch channel. If you're an architect, I invite you to go over to Facebook, join the EntreArchitect Community Facebook group if you're not already, and join it there from Facebook Live over there on the Facebook platform. So those are ways that you can engage in that conversation later. But like I said, I realize that much of our audience, all of our audience, has really been built off of a platform for architects on the Context and Clarity side. But these conversations that we have, courage over confidence, these are not just architect type, just topics for architects. So why not expand this to whoever? If you're sales, if you're real estate, if you're a doctor, an accountant, whatever you do, courage is something that you need. And so just real quickly before I sign off here, because we've got some things to figure out in the next little less than 2 hours here. Sorry, I got to respond to this message really quickly. Just to touch on a couple of points that we touched on in the conversation on Clubhouse this morning. One of the things that we talked about was Debbie Millman's take on courage over confidence. She quoted one of her guests, conversation she had on one of her guests, as saying that overly confident people often come off as arrogant, often come off as off-putting. We're all pretty sure when we run into that people. And again, how do we define overly confident? I don't know, but I think we've probably witnessed. I think we all know what that looks like and feels like. And when we encounter someone like that, I think most of us are pretty sure that particular person is hiding something. They're projecting something, right? They're compensating for something. So as the quote goes, overly confident people are these people that are out here that are doing these things, and most of us don't engage with that we don't respect that, and confidence can be really hard. True, authentic confidence can be really hard to come by for many professionals. You have to be confident, though. You have to be confident in your skills and your proficiencies and your own expertise. But how do you get to that point? And so the gist of the conversation is that courage is actually more important than confidence, because courage is what it takes to take that next step forward, even in the face of not knowing, even in the face of fear. Right. Again, I said at the beginning, this week, we've talked about fear. We've talked about imposter syndrome. We've talked about perfectionism. What it takes to get past fear, to get past imposter syndrome, to get past perfectionism is confidence. We've got to, or it's not confidence, sorry, it's courage. If you're afraid, Courage doesn't mean that you take the courage doesn't mean that you're not afraid. Courage means that you're willing to take that first step, that next step in the face of fear, right? The only way to get past imposter syndrome is to have the courage to step past that doubt, to step past that insecurity, whatever's causing it. The only way to get past your perfectionism is as you use perfectionism as an excuse, as a shield, something to hide behind. The only way to step out and step beyond that is to have the courage to take that next step. So that was the gist of what that conversation was about, is that courage is actually the most important thing, because all of those little steps in courage can help you build to the point, can help you find successes and help you find the little victories along the way. And the sum of all of those steps, the sum of all of those little successes and those little victories is what adds up to confidence. So that was sort of the gist of courage over confidence. We talked about that today. Some weren't comfortable with the idea that overly confident people, whatever that definition is, they weren't comfortable with that. And again, I think that comes down to, how do we define that? What does that actually mean? There is certainly confidence, and many of us can certainly project confidence, and sometimes it's absolutely necessary to maybe even project more confidence than we actually have in the moment. But where do we draw that line? And I think that's something we've come up against all week with the fear and the imposter syndrome and the perfectionism. Is there's a line somewhere, right? There's a line that we have to figure out where it is, maybe even define where it is, and figure out how to step across it, and then figure out how far or how far is too far, right? And so I think there's a lot of gray area. I think there's a lot that we have to understand and even define for ourselves. But I think, to recap these conversations for the entire week, the idea of courage being extremely important, no matter what you do. Again, sales, real estate, doctor, attorney, accountant, architect, engineer, construction, other creative. How much courage does it take? What kind of work do you do? How much courage does it take to put the pen to paper, or when you're staring at the blank screen and the cursor is flashing, if it even does that anymore? It used to do that. How much courage does it take to draw the first line, right? Most of you, again, I'm trying to think as I talk here and think, is there anybody in professional services, no matter what you do, is there anybody in professional services that has the answer, the correct answer in the very first conversation with your client or your customer or your patient, whatever you call that person that you serve? Are there any of you in professional services that have the definitive answer right now in that very first conversation with the people that you serve? And as I'm thinking about it off the top of my head, I don't think so. If you're an architect or an engineer, right? Design thinking, you figure it out. You design it as you go. Contractor, you've got to figure things out. Attorney, you've got to do some research and figure things out. Doctor, you're probably going to do some tests, maybe some research, diagnose things and figure things out. I think it's the same for all of you out there. So I think having the understanding that we don't know at the very beginning, but we're going to learn, we're going to design, we're going to figure it out as we go, and we're going to get to the appropriate answer. We're going to have the courage to take that journey. We're going to have to enlist our customer, our client, our patient to have that courage and go on that journey with us as well. So again, another line, where's the line between the expertise, the professionalism, and the exploration? I think that's another thing that revolves around our worlds as well. So I think there's, again, just sort of stream of consciousness today, a lot of things swirling around in the air right now. But I think it's important for us to understand and be okay with the fact that we don't know and have the courage to take that next step forward. It's the most important step, right? You can't move forward without taking that first step. If you aren't moving forward, are you going backwards, right? What's it costing you to not move forward? Those are some of the things that we've been talking about all week, that I've been thinking about all week. So things to think about. So again, if you're watching this, I'm about to sign off here. If you're watching this on the recorded version, wherever you are, use the hashtag replay and comment. Say, hey, I'm watching the replay. Tell me where you are. Tell me what you do. Give me your thoughts on these topics that we've been covering all week. And I'll appreciate that. I'll appreciate you. And thank you for watching this. Again, my name is Jeff Eccles. I'm the President and Chief Strategy Officer of Echo Engagement. I'm also the Director of Brand Strategy for EntreArchitect. I host Context and Clarity live every weekday at 4 p.m. Eastern inside the EntreArchitect Community Facebook group. Today, Thursday, it'll be simulcast to the Facebook group, but also to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch, all at the same time, with a special guest. And then every morning, weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, we're on the Clubhouse app. And to do our 30-minute CNC coffee talk is what we call those. Different title, of course, different topic every single morning. So if you're interested in engaging in one of those conversations, I invite you to join us on any of those platforms. Reach out to me if you need to know more. Comment on one of these platforms that you're watching this on now, and I'll help you out with any of those things. So again, thank you to all of you. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you in about an hour and a half on Context and Clarity Live.